Welcome to Your Moment with Miguel Ramirez.
Hello, and welcome to Your Moment. My name is Miguel Ramirez, and in today's episode, I'm going to be interviewing Raul Chavez. Raul Chavez is a professor at Mount San Antonio College. He's also written a book, Childhood Indians, Television Film, and Sustaining the White Subconscious. In today's episode, we talk about cultural influences through media. We also touch on the film Black Fox with Christopher Reeves and Tony Todd, and the inaccuracies of Native Americans depicted in that film. And he talks about film directors and the perspective they may have when developing a film. My interview with Raul Chavez.
I think that goes back to the issue that I raised earlier about thinking brown, and that as we look at our world through those, white tinted glasses, I don't see color. I don't see a situation where an indigenous perspective needs to be incorporated. And so I include images, stories that reflect my cultural biases. There was a movie that came out in the mid-1990s. It was Christopher Reeves, and for the life of me, I can't remember the title of the film, but there's a scene where the hero has a duel with an Indian over a woman that the Indian had physically abused, and the hero is going to take back to safety. And so as the story goes, they have a traditional Kiowa fight, which involves the two standing on a log over a pit full of rattlesnakes. And again, this is pure fantasy coming out of some white writer's mind. You have the Billy Jack stories of the 1970s also, where he is bitten multiple times by a rattlesnake to have his vision. Native Americans did it the hard way. They fasted, and that was their way of doing it. He did it the fast way. He just had his these snakes.
Bites.
Yeah, snake bites. I think that's part of the problem. I constantly in complaining about the way Hollywood continues to ignore the presence of brown people in stories. One of my favorite whipping boys is Peter Jackson and his whole Hobbits series, the Lord of the Rings series, and it's about understanding that I do not consider Peter Jackson to be a racist, but yet at the same time, every single one of his films has characters that are white, without the presence of brown people, other than, as we talked about many, many times in our classes, the orc as being probably the only brown creature in these films, and it's not his fault. Mm-hmm. The culture he grew up in. He doesn't see brown. And until Hollywood opens its doors to brown people, women, to portray their stories, to tell their sides, it's still going to be a very white male dictated narrative, and white males do not think brown.
And when it comes to learning more about Native American culture, Native American customs, what would you recommend being a good resource for information?
That's the hardest question you've asked, because it's not something you learn from a book. You can try to understand it through readings, but it's about exposure to Native culture, Native communities. It's about engaging with peoples that, for many of us, we would have never thought of reaching out to. And so there are books out there. There's some good books out there. There are Native authors. There are mainstream American authors who try to tell the stories. We have our reading list of books that we laugh about. People have to be careful about those. It's hard to believe that there are natives out there writing about their spiritual experiences for commercial purposes.
What would you say is like one of the top books to laugh about that you can recall?
I have to be honest. I think I've put them so far out of my mind that I can't remember the titles, but you have the Castañeda book of the early 90s where he went to live amongst the Yaqui in Sonora and had his visions and such. And later on, though, he was discovered to have invented a lot of his stories. There's also another book, also by an alleged native shaman who has a series of ways. He explains that there's a list of ways of knowledge that will make you a better person. And for the life of me, I can't remember any of these titles. But maybe subconsciously I've just blocked them out.
And leaving with the final thought, what is the message that you would like to leave the audience with when it comes to Native Americans?
We're good people. We want, I'm going to sound like cliche, but we want what everyone else wants. And it's just to be respected as human beings. And I don't think that we've done that yet. We still want our Indians to be caricatures. We still want our Indians to be submissive. We have a hard time when brown people assert themselves. And so whether it be protest over pipelines, whether it be protest to protect the Arctic Circle, whatever it might be that prevents corporate America from fulfilling its obligation to the country to provide jobs and bring oil and things. There are other things that are more important. And so I just want people to understand that it's a good place. It's a good place. And to indigenous peoples, we don't want to take back America. It's not about sending everybody back on the boat. We just want to be able to actually share. We want you to live up to what you claim this country stands for. Equality, liberty, freedom for all. You've got to let us in. And I think that's really what I try to instill in all my students, and that is that, again, Thinking Brown is about respecting the experiences of all people of color.
And on that note, that's a terrific message. And this concludes my interview. Raul Chavez, thank you very much for
my pleasure.
In the studio.
Stay up to date with news, interviews, and upcoming show episodes by following Your Moment with Miguel Ramirez on Spreaker.com.